Hello, I'm Is2Mask. And I'm creating this video as a result of an experience I went through trying to troubleshoot some issues that a friend was having recording Naraka Bladepoint. Now, this basically is going to amount to me warning you about the difference between SMR and CMR hard drives. There's plenty of videos and technical documents and stuff like that on the internet about this particular subject, but it was the process that brought us to this revelation that kind of gave me the idea that maybe I should make a video and put something on the internet that actually explains that this is actually the issue that you're running into, because there is basically no information whatsoever. Whenever you try to find information about the innumerable problems that OBS has, you're usually just met with blank stares or misleading information. For example, it did take OBS a great many years to fix the one or two lines necessary to make I-444 actually work properly and not produce distorted lines on the side of the screen. So we had to use a custom build for many years until they finally fixed it. So this problem is specifically, I never had this problem myself. This is me trying to help a friend because, well, here's his video that he has. So this here is, it's going to show the characteristics of what his problem actually was. So most of the time, it seemed like he could record just fine. Other times, this would happen. It would just start shitting the bed. Just dropping frames like fuck. So really strange and very inconsistent. Now if we jump to some other portions of his video, he's not gonna have that many problems at all, right? It's just performing smoothly. Now you see he's even got his game settings down to absolute garbage. So the thing is, there's not really much room for his hardware to actually be a source of the problem here, because he is running a modern high-end CPU. He's running, I don't think it's the highest end GPU. It's like maybe a 6600 or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. And the recording is on a RAID as well. So, you know, we go through all the usual check marks of trying to figure out how to fix this. You know, or make sure you're not recording to the same disk that Windows is on. You know, make sure nothing else is running. Check the logs and stuff like that. So OBS actually reports this problem as a encoder overload. And that's where the real issue comes up, is OBS says it's an encoder overload. And if you go and look at the logs, you're going to see it dropping like 30% of the frames or something like that. The other problem with this is it's a very inconsistent problem to debug. You're not going to notice it a lot of the time. It only seems to show up after a while. So the characteristics of this are not really typical that you'd expect out of something like disk failure. When he actually went into the Windows Performance Manager and logged what precisely was going on, you would see that the disk would be sitting with like multi-second delay on the cache, and it never would go up against like 1 megabyte transfer rate. And this strongly reminded me of a problem that I had a couple of years ago with the SMR drive that is on this system, which is a external, that's this one. So the problem I had with this drive is I don't have everything for Windows set on the SSD for the C drive. Something like the desktop, that doesn't need to be on the SSD. It's just, I just use it just to store files. The problem is that when this drive filled up to about 85-90% capacity, if I interacted with the desktop in any fashion, clicking on files, moving on files, trying to do anything with it, the whole system, the whole computer would lock up for 10, 20, 30 seconds, even longer. And I thought that I was having some kind of major hardware failure, because that's a pretty serious problem. No, it's just because it's an SMR drive and because its capacity was quite full. Now, again, there is a lot of information out there about this, but nothing really conclusive. But if you look at some of the benchmarks for SMR drives, you're going to see that while SMR drives are advertised as being comparable to CMR drives, they're not. There is actually no advantage to the SMR drive whatsoever. It was, on paper, it looks kind of like a, you know, something you can sell for cheaper for storage, but in real world, it's just a powder keg waiting to go off. So again, there's lots of documents and videos that go into the technical details about this. I think that one dude's name is Some Tech Guy or something like that. He has a bunch of videos on SMR and CMR drives that are certainly worth checking out if you want to get into the actual technical specifications of this. But the really big part that I want to point out here is the SMR drive's higher capacity will also affect performance. When data is written to an SMR drive, the head will write data onto an empty area of the drive instead of overwriting an existing track. Then when the drive is not in use, it will enter a reorganization mode where old data on the original track is deleted to make space for future use. Because this reorganization is the only way to clear old data, idle time is essential to SMR drives. That's why it was freaking out for me on Windows, because I was using it for my desktop, and that meant that it really wasn't going to be idle for very long whenever I'm doing workloads, like say something for D&D. So I'm just dumping files onto the desktop, adding them, removing them, something like that. Constant drive access will give the drive no time to reorganize the magnetic tracks, leading to very, very poor drive performance. So it took a while to get him to test it on his SSD. I kept telling him to test recordings on the SSD to rule out drive failure. And then when he did and reported this information that, you know, his recording was working fine on the other drive, I told him to tell me the model number for his hard drives. So that was this. And this is something you should do regardless. If you're going to buy a hard drive, look up the model number, look up its actual technical specifications. Because a lot of this does not get reported on websites like Amazon, and I can't remember if Memory Express even reports this or whatever, but you want to look up get a PDF or something like that from their website. If they won't give you it, don't buy it. Simple as. Because you can see right here, recording technology, SMR across the board on this line of hard drives. So this is why pinpointing exact periods was so difficult, why changing the game's performance settings and stuff like that doesn't really matter. Yeah, Naraka is Unity, and Unity is a heaping pile of shit, and I've never seen a Unity game in existence that actually has good performance, especially for what it looks like, but that was never the problem here. That was never the problem. The problem was always SMR. And recording to a drive is certainly one of the more intensive operations, and this is why it takes a while to show up, because it would run out of its little free cache or whatever it's doing, and then it would just freak out. And random writes and stuff like that is where SMR particularly falls apart. It'll give you characteristics of drive failure. No, the drive isn't failing, it's just shit. Simple as. So that's what I wanted to highlight, is OBS misreports this, because the hard drive is no longer really writing that well at all, and OBS will say it's an encoder overload. It's not. It has nothing to do with an encoder overload at all. It has to do with the disk being unable to write the data, which is resulting in it skipping the data entirely. Now, I've had lots of issues with OBS. I've really never had encoder overload problems. What I have had is OBS just silently stops recording, but it doesn't stop recording. It says it's recording, but it isn't. So, say for example, a good chunk of my Naraka videos will have, and this is on very high performance, like Western Digital Blacks and stuff like that, like 2 or 3 or 4 minutes of the end of the video will just be missing for no reason. And it does that very randomly. And it doesn't report any drop frames or any problems or anything like that. So it's, but I mean, beyond issues like that, I've never really had this kind of thing show up, because I've never tried to record to an SMR drive. So if you run into problems and you cannot troubleshoot these encoder overload nonsense, make sure that you are not recording to an SMR drive, regardless if it's on a RAID or not. That will be all. Remember, Canada is a failed state.